We've all had that moment, right? Where you walk into a room,
Hmm.
maybe open the fridge, and then poof, the reason you went in there, completely gone,
Right.
totally blank. And you might close the door, kind of sigh, and have that little worry like, oh boy, am I losing it?
That senior moment feeling.
Exactly. But that quiet, really common experience, the one we often just brush off, it might actually be a signal, something, well, deeper and more structural happening in the brain.
So today we're doing a deep dive into this gradual, sometimes very subtle loss of what's called executive function. And our goal here is really two things. First, we want to get clear on what executive function is and what happens when this sort of control center in the brain starts to, slow down a bit. And second, maybe most importantly, we want to show you how some really simple, compassionate behavioral strategies, when you apply them thoughtfully, can actually build bridges back to independence and dignity. It's such a critical area because executive function, or ES as we often call it, it gets misunderstood a lot.
Mm.
People sometimes think it's just about being smart or pure memory, but it's actually more like the brain's internal management system.
Okay.
Think of it as like the mind's control center, or maybe an invisible conductor. It coordinates everything. It organizes, sequences tasks, monitors how we're doing with complex behaviors every single day.
An invisible conductor. I like that.
And the real insight, I think, from the research we're looking at is that a decline in EF, it's absolutely not about someone lacking motivation.
Mm.
It's not a reflection of their core intelligence either.
Yeah.
When these functions weaken, especially as people age, what we're really seeing is that the brain's internal taskmasters are losing clarity. They kind of get scattered.
Taskmasters.
Yeah, meaning tasks that used to feel automatic suddenly take this huge amount of conscious effort. And that quickly makes people feel overwhelmed.
Okay, let's unpack this then. If EF is the conductor, what are the specific instruments in this orchestra? You said taskmasters. What are those core skills that need to work together for us to just manage our day?
Right. Well, the research pretty consistently highlights 5 key skills. These are the ones that really define executive function and basically support our everyday independence. So first up is working memory, that your ability to hold information in your mind and use it right now, like calculating a tip or remembering a phone number just long enough to dial it.
Ah, okay.
If that weakens, you might forget instructions halfway through hearing them.
And that seems like the one that would hit conversations immediately, right? You
Yeah.
can't quite hold on to the first point while someone's making the second point.
Exactly. It makes back and forth really tough. Then you've got planning and organizing. This is about taking a big goal, say plan and cook dinner for 4, and breaking it down into maybe, 20 small sequential steps. Order matters. Third is time management. Super important for things like getting to appointments or just understanding how long something will take.
Right.
If you lose a good sense of this, you might think 10 minutes feels like an hour. Or the opposite, you might start a huge task 5 minutes before you need to leave.
That's fascinating because poor time management isn't always procrastination, is it? It could be a cognitive thing, like not grasping the actual time needed.
Precisely. It's a miscalculation, not necessarily laziness. Then the last 2 are decision-making. So choosing between options without getting totally stuck or overwhelmed.
Choice paralysis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And finally, focus and attention. Just being able to stay on task, stick with one goal,
Yeah.
without every little internal thought or external noise pulling you away.
Wow. Okay, when you list them like that, planning, working memory, timing, deciding, focusing, you really see how much they underpin, well, just getting through a normal Monday. So what happens, behaviorally speaking, when these functions start to fray? What does that look like on the outside?
Well, the change can be quite visible and honestly often very distressing for the person and their family. Because that internal sequencing is off, you start seeing things like repetitive actions, maybe putting the same can away twice in the cupboard, or skipping major steps in a routine like forgetting to rinse the shampoo out of their hair. They might miss appointments more often, or just seem paralyzed by a standard chore they used to handle easily. And the key is, these aren't just random little oops moments of forgetfulness. They're actually pretty clear behavioral indicators that the system managing these complex step-by-step tasks is under, well, significant strain.
Okay, this brings us to something really important, a major point of confusion, I think, for anyone trying to help a loved one. How do you tell the difference? Is it a genuine memory problem, which is often the first fear, right? Dementia? Or is it specifically this sequencing thing, the executive function, going offline? Because they can look really similar sometimes.
That's a great question, and it's a really crucial distinction for you as the listener to get. because how you understand it changes the kind of support that's actually helpful. So generally, memory loss involves forgetting specific things, facts, information, past events,
Mm-mm.
forgetting the name of the doctor you saw yesterday, or forgetting your grandson called. That's more classic memory impairment.
Okay, forgetting facts.
Right. Now, executive dysfunction, that affects the sequence and the management of tasks. It's not about forgetting that the coffee maker exists. It's forgetting which button to press first, or the order of steps needed to actually make the coffee. If someone forgets how to balance a checkbook step by step, that points more toward the EF strain. If they just forget where they put the checkbook, that's more likely standard memory.
Hang on, let me just pause there because that's critical. So, forgetting coffee exists memory. Forgetting the order of the 3 buttons you push every morning to make the coffee, that's EF.
You've got it. That's the core difference. And the research really emphasizes this point. Forgetting steps in a familiar routine isn't always a sign of deep memory loss or dementia. Sometimes it just reflects how an aging brain is managing the flow of information differently. We shouldn't automatically jump to the worst-case scenario.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Once that EF system starts struggling, the behavior changes quite dramatically. And the person's internal goal, their motivation, it shifts. It moves away from trying to get the task done perfectly completion and shifts more towards just finding comfort and safety. Is that right?
That's absolutely the heart of it from an empathetic standpoint. When your internal conductor loses the sheet music, the world suddenly feels confusing, overwhelming. So the natural human instinct is to pull back, to find something predictable. They're seeking safety, not trying to shirk responsibility or be difficult.
That reframes things completely.
It does. And this drive for safety, it leads to about 3 common behavioral changes you might observe. First, avoidance behaviors. They might start skipping tasks that feel mentally taxing, things like dealing with mail, finances, planning meals.
Okay, avoidance.
Second, emotional withdrawal. You might see sudden frustration, maybe anger, or even shame when they try a task and falter. Because deep down, they often know they should be able to do it.
That must be incredibly hard.
It is. And finally, you might see rigid routines, clinging really fiercely to familiar patterns, even if they're not very efficient anymore, because those known steps feel safe and predictable.
So the resistance or the frustration we might see isn't laziness, it's actually a defense mechanism. It's built around trying to find safety from that feeling of cognitive failure.
Exactly. Recognizing that shift, it just completely changes the game for anyone trying to help.
It really does.
And if the problem stems from the environment feeling too complex for the strained system, then the solution needs to be environmental too. Which is why we turn to approaches like applied behavior analysis, or ABA.
Okay, let's talk solutions. ABA, it's a toolkit used in lots of areas, but how does it apply here? You're saying it's about reshaping the environment to make success easier.
Precisely.
So, building a better external structure for the brain rather than just demanding that the tired internal system try harder?
That's the essence of it. And this is where we get practical and actionable. We're talking about the how-tos for caregivers, for family members, to help restore those executive routines. There are about 5 key strategies that focus on maximizing independence through external structure. The first one is fundamental. Simplify routines. You absolutely have to break complex tasks down into short, visible, concrete steps.
Like a checklist.
Exactly. If doing laundry has 7 steps, you list all 7, maybe with little checkboxes, or even simple photos for each step. You're taking confusing internal demands and making them crystal clear external instructions.
Okay, that sounds great in theory. But, if someone is already feeling ashamed or resistant, wouldn't introducing a checklist like that morning map idea from the source, wouldn't that feel a bit, patronizing? How do you handle that potential pushback?
That's a really important practical question. The key is how it's introduced. It's not a demand from the caregiver. It's framed as a shared tool designed together with the person to make things smoother. Emphasize consistency, maybe even use it yourself for certain things.
Collaboration, not imposition.
Exactly. Which leads to the second strategy. Use environmental prompts. The reminder, the cue, has to be right where the action happens. A note about brushing teeth needs to be by the bathroom sink, not on the fridge. An alarm for medication needs to be set on their phone or a dedicated device, not just hoping they'll remember.
So you're basically outsourcing the organizational work, moving it from the brain into the physical space around them. Makes sense. What about decision fatigue? That seems like a big one.
Huge. Which brings us to number 3. Offer structured choices. This is vital. It preserves their sense of autonomy, which is so important for dignity, but it provides guardrails. So instead of an open-ended, potentially overwhelming question like, what do you want to wear today, which requires a lot of EF, you offer a structured choice.
Like,
Like, would you prefer the blue shirt or the green shirt today? You dramatically reduce the cognitive load, but they still get to make the final call.
oh, that's powerful. You're keeping their autonomy intact, but setting guide rails. They control the outcome, but you simplify the input. Clever.
It works wonders. Then, fourth, absolutely crucial for keeping motivation up, reinforce success. Even small acknowledgments matter. A simple, genuine, that's great, you got that done perfectly, or nice job remembering that step. It helps rebuild confidence and counteracts that awful feeling of shame or frustration when things go wrong.
Positive feedback loops.
Exactly. And finally, number 5, limit distractions. Seems obvious, but it's key. Turn off the TV during meal prep. Silence the phone during bill paying. Clear clutter's way during tasks that need focus. When executive function is already taxed, every single extra stimulus as a notification, background noise, acts like a potential derailer. It just ramps up mental fatigue unnecessarily.
Right, and we saw this work with the example we started with, Mrs. L. The source mentioned her daughter created that daily morning map, just a simple list taped right by the kitchen counter. And apparently the frustration eased pretty quickly. That list became her reliable external taskmaster. It gave her actions a sequence even when her internal system couldn't quite recall the next step on its own.
That case study is a perfect illustration of the core research insight, like the work from Minglian and Ellis mentioned in the materials. Their finding essentially boils down to this.
Yeah.
Executive function loss doesn't erase ability, it fragments access. Structured environments rebuild the bridges that thought alone can't cross.
Wow. Say that again. It fragments access. That changes everything, doesn't it?
It really does.
It means we have to stop blaming the person for forgetting and maybe start looking at the environment. Is it structured poorly? Does it lack clarity? It implies that really behavior follows design. If you build the world around them with clarity and compassion, independence doesn't just vanish. It just starts relying on external cues instead of internal ones.
Absolutely. And for you, the listener, this means you can turn simple observation into real empowerment. If you often hear a loved one say, shoot, I forgot what I was doing again, don't just offer sympathy. Start looking for the patterns. We really encourage you to track, maybe just mentally at first, 3 things. What time of day does this confusion seem to happen most? What specific task were they trying to do right before they got stuck? And were there any obvious distractions or maybe strong emotions present around that time?
Because the patterns point to the solution.
The patterns point directly to the kind of support or environmental tweak that's needed. It gives you a starting place.
But we still need to circle back to that crucial point about dignity. How do you implement these systems, the lists, the prompts, the choices, without making the person feel micromanaged or, worse, controlled? Because that's just soul-destroying.
It is, and the consensus really points towards gentle collaboration, partnership. So instead of issuing instructions, time to brush your teeth, or just doing the task for them, which takes away their agency completely,
Right.
you use phrases like, hey, let's go over the morning list together, or can you help me check off the next step here, maybe what's next on our plan. Creating these small shared rituals around the structure, it preserves their dignity while still making sure the necessary support is actually in place. It's doing with, not doing to or doing for.
Doing with. I like that. Okay, so what does this all mean? Where does this deep dive leave us? We started with Mrs. L at the fridge, feeling like she was losing it. But what we've learned today suggests she wasn't necessarily losing her mind. She was losing the structure needed to sequence her thoughts and actions effectively. And behavioral science, applied this way, reminds us that successful aging, or supporting someone who is aging, isn't always about fixing memory. Often it's about redesigning the environment, finding a rhythm, and providing consistent, compassionate external support.
That's the overarching truth, I believe. Aging doesn't automatically erase someone's core abilities or who they are. It simply changes how those abilities need to be accessed and guided. Our role then becomes providing the map when the internal compass gets a little shaky. And since we now understand that these patterns really do point towards solutions, here's a final thought we want to leave you with. Something to maybe mull over on your own. Think about one routine you handle easily right now. Maybe it's making your morning coffee, managing your emails, or packing for a trip. Just picture it. Now imagine your own executive function started to slow down, maybe starting tomorrow. What specific environmental cues, what lists, what prompts, what simplified choices would you need to design for yourself to make sure you could still do that task successfully? Thinking about that, really picturing what you would need, it might just fundamentally change how you approach designing the world around you. or for a loved one starting today.